Morning, everybody. How are we doing? This is Jeremiah, and we are rolling with the first of our little series on CAD for Beginners. Got some great stuff for you. I have a couple very quick housekeeping items. I do want to let you know this is being recorded, so it'll be available for you to watch again and again if necessary. So it's going to be a great little resource for you. But also, even though it is being recorded, right now it's live. We're actually here. So you are able to ask us questions. And in fact, we really do like that because we did not choose to just record this and put it on the website. It's here live, so we want that interaction with you, and that interaction is through the Q&A button there, bottom of your screen. And I'd recommend clicking that now. Just get the question box on the screen where it's going to fit nice, so it'll be a little quicker when you do have a question to type in. But just also note in that little dialog box, you can see the answers that I'll be typing to anyone else's questions. So it makes a great little companion as you're here, so you're not just watching a recording. But other than that, we've got some great content. This is going to be really fantastic if you are just getting into CAD, of course, or want a little refresher. Might be a little basic, but I'm sure there'll be some things that maybe you weren't quite aware of, because we'll be intermixing, some of the latest enhancements of CAD. And a lot of us, might have learned CAD a decade or two ago, and there's a slightly different way that we would recommend you start out. So that's what we're going to be showing, is with the latest and greatest. So enough of my yammer yammer. Hey Jake, we got a solid hour. Let's rock and roll.
All right, thank you guys. Thanks, Jer, and welcome everybody. So this is me. I am the irrigation specialist on staff, but I have been known to dabble in AutoCAD. So we are going to go through what looks like a very simple outline. As just another reminder, this is a very simple webinar, very, very basic. While it might look like we're not going to cover very much, it might feel overwhelming to some people. So, just ask those questions. Let us know, what questions you do have, comments you do have. Know that depending on the level of question, we might not get to it in this webinar. And that's why we've broken it up into 3 different levels, advancements, so that, we can really focus in on honing in those basic skills and understanding. So we will do our best to note all of those and get them queued up for other stuff. So jumping right into it, things that just right out of the gate, we want to make sure that we just start understanding. If we're completely new to CAD, or have never even heard of CAD before and we're looking into it, there are a few terms that will help you navigate through as you start playing around with stuff. And we're mainly going to be focusing in the first 7 here. And it's just important to know that, terminology is everything as we start playing around with stuff. It'll help you look for the right knowledge base articles. It'll help you communicate with us if you're having troubles finding something. And if we're trying to relay that information on where you're supposed to look. So we'll try to make a connection visually with these words here. And we'll kind of start with that workspace spot. So the workspace really is everything here, toolbars, ribbons, panels, and really the tool sets and how they lay out. So when we talk about the toolbar or the ribbon, we're talking about this upper section of buttons and options. When we talk about a specific palette, whether we're talking about our layer properties manager or the properties manager or an XREF manager, these are called palettes. And when we talk about what is showing in your command line, or go ahead and type X command, this is where this is happening. So your command line is in that white little spot, and you might see an additional gray section, depending on how your command line is sort of set up, but that's your text window. So These are really the main basic functions, and then you might hear us talk about your layouts or your model space. And these tabs here are really there to navigate you between your actual drawing window spot, whether you're seeing your model space or whether you're jumping over into an actual layout or paper space. So those are the main functions of our workspace here that we're going to be bouncing back and forth with. Now the fun one, the mouse. Navigation with the mouse, especially in CAD, is different. It has a lot of different functions. So we want to take just a second to go over, in still form, how these kind of work. And then we'll definitely be doing this live as well. So just as a reference, these are here for your use later if you wanted to pause. So you have a couple different options when selecting and even deselecting. And just keep in mind throughout AutoCAD, I'll try to make this blanket statement here. CAD is more of a click once it sort of picks up that item or starts that command, you move the mouse and you click again. It's not a click and drag kind of scenario where you're trying to hold something and moving it. It is a click, move, click. So for this first little diagram here, I'm clicking over there on the right side and I'm moving left and I'm clicking a second time. And that result is that image to the right there that's selecting anything that green area crosses. Versely, if I'm clicking and moving my mouse right, so clicking from the left side there and dragging and clicking down to the right, what that blue selection does is it actually only selects what's entirely in that window. So you can see that the arcs and lines that it still crosses over is not entirely encompassed in that, so it did not select it. So you have two special ways of actually selecting items. Aside from just simply clicking on an item and having it select that one single item, your click, move, and click selection, you can highlight multiple things without being too precise or only get what you need that way. You might forget about the click and move and click, and you might click and drag. And this is the result that you're going to get there. But it still has its power to be able to click and drag and circle like a more of a freehand selection allows you to go outside of the realm of that standard fixed window selection, which makes selecting on curves and being more in and out of line work and selecting what you want to pretty nice. And then we have grabbing a vertex, and those vertex is those little blue dots. So or a vertice, those can be selected and they will then move. So same thing with our window selection. If you click one of those points, you're going to grab that point and it will then move to wherever you want it to, and then you're going to click again. So what happens if you do accidentally click a vertex or start a window selection and selected the wrong stuff? How do you get out of that deselect mode? Well, your best friend for most of this stuff is going to be the escape key. So just I always have, as I'm drafting and doing things, having the escape key right under my pointer or my birdie finger on my left hand, and I just hover over that key as a home base basically as I'm drafting and stuff like that, so that I can quickly just deselect or ungrab or unhook from something that I've got going on. So that was all using the left mouse button, okay? What we're going to talk about now is the pan and zoom function, and that's all done with the scroll wheel. I call it a rolly wheel or a scrolly wheel, the zoom wheel. But if your mouse does not have one of these buttons, it is very, very, very suggested that you go get one. This guy here is going to allow us to do a couple different functions within that same scrolly wheel button. So if you were to scroll forward or push the rolly wheel forward, it's going to zoom in. And the cool thing about CAD, and we'll do this live as well, but the cool thing about CAD is it's kind of a point and aim with your crosshair and then zoom in, and it will zoom into that crosshair. So you can see in the larger image, I've got it centered on that first circle there. And as I scroll in, it zooms directly to that. If I were to hover my crosshair over a smaller circle and zoom there, it would start zooming to that crosshair. If we scroll backwards or pull back on that scrolly wheel, it's going to zoom out. And the same thing applies. It's going to basically scroll out, basing the zoom point from that crosshair. And I don't know if I've termed this phrase or not, or if anybody else uses it. I use the word double rolly click, but that's basically pushing down on the wheel, not scrolling with it, but pushing down on the wheel twice quickly. It will actually do a zoom extents on your drawing. So knowing these three functions helps you actually navigate quite well, quite fast, without doing many other trying to find the pan tool or the zoom tool and stuff like that. So, and then one more function that this little rolly wheel does is that if you press and hold it, instead of double clicking it, it will actually turn into the hand and pan. So you can actually grab your model and start moving around that way. So the main four functions here is scrolling in, scrolling out, double clicking that scroll wheel, and pressing and holding it. Gives you quite a bit of flexibility. So as we start doing things live and you see me moving around and stuff like that, that's all I'm doing is I'm just harnessing the power of the mouse. Do we have any questions up to this point, Jer?
Well, we've had a couple good questions on things I was able to answer. So I think we're doing good
Okay.
on all this. Let's
Okay,
keep
cool.
it moving.
All right. So that's just a quick little navigation set of stuff. Next little topic we want to cover right quick is our units. Units obviously is a very, very important part of CAD. You know, how we're actually drafting. That's going to really put a kink in things if you've got the wrong unit set and you start inserting things or trying to draw lines and scale stuff, it's going to be at the wrong unit. So understanding that the command units, or if you type units into the command line, you're going to get this little dialog box. So we'll go over this in a little bit more detail, but we want to kind of directly compare what that actually means when we start working with an actual site. So again, this being a basic webinar, we're not going into XREFs and attaching images and stuff like that, but this is just assuming, or what we're talking about here is we have a site that we want to model, and this site is drawn at 1:1, okay? This is basically like if you were to go to Google Earth and measure something, it is the size that it actually is in real life. That's what your model space is. But you cannot fit an entire site as it really is on a piece of paper. So that is where our paper space or our layouts come into play. So depending on the size of your sheet and the site that you're working with, it all kind of intersects here into what I'm actually able to display, and that's through a viewport. So when we talk about a viewport, we're talking about this little cutout that is going to show us a portion of our actual site in model space. And this viewport has to have a scale set to it. And that's the only way that we can transcribe what's drawn in real world units to actually fitting on a piece of paper. So I'm sure we're all familiar with the nice little triangle ruler that shows all the scales. All of that kind of stuff is going to be done through this viewport and calculated so that one specific drawing unit is related to one specific type of paper unit. So we'll get into that a little bit later live. But to graphically show that, we have our paper space and we have our viewport. And this viewport, like I said, is a nice little window that's cut in, and I'm peering down into my model space. So as I activate that, that viewport, I'm able to move around and zoom in and out and fit what I want to see of that model space onto my paper space. So when we talk about layers, and we'll get into this in a little bit, what is a layer? So just at the basic core elements of this thing, it's a way to keep things organized. From a visual standpoint, separating things out, being able to make easier edits to specific things and not others, and then again, how it looks on our paper. So as we start to build this drawing up, you're going to start to see that we can include a lot of different layers that represents a lot of different things, but it allows us to start manipulating that stuff independent from each other and get us the look that we want. Line work, this one's pretty basic as well. That's anything that is making it visually look like you want it to. And that's all done by lines and arcs and polylines and circles. It's basically all of your simple shapes that sort of get combined together to make what it is that you're drafting. So if you keep that at the back of your mind as, CAD's not a really mean, scary thing. You're just drawing lines and arcs and you're making them put together. You'll definitely be better off. But if we were to take this little sample area and kind of dissect it a bit, there are better practices than others as we start drafting things. So at this example, you'll see if I try to select this little island and I clicked on that arc, he's just selecting one portion of it. And this is an arc. And if I try to click another part of it, it would be just a line. And so trying to manipulate and modify these specific areas starts to get a bit tedious and hard to work with. So what our suggested method of use, and just because it has a lot more benefits, is using polylines. And a polyline is basically the ability to draw continually and have them always be joined together. And you can switch between arcs and line forms to make shapes a lot easier. And once that's made, the best part about these polylines is the ability to actually close these polylines up and generate your areas and square footages and really just move and manipulate things better. So with that, that's a crash course that we're going to cover now all live. Do we have any questions before we get into it?
I think we're getting some just great questions that I have been able to answer. So kind of across the map, people are like, it's really spurring all of their little getting into CAD things. But let's get into showing some things and save some time at the end to wrap up.
Very good, very good. All right, so what we're going to do right off the bat is go back to our workspace kind of setup and just sort of get familiar with things a little bit, and know that here I am in my model space. If I move my mouse around, I can see my crosshair move, but I can see down here in the lower left corner that I have my model and layout. So if I were to click one or the other, it will start switching me back and forth. Okay. The command line, I'll actually show you that in a second. The panels, the ones that I really want to just bring up now, because it's going to relate to creating layers and looking at information about items, is our layer property manager and our properties manager. So those two dialog boxes should always be up, whether it's on a different screen or collapsed. We'll show you how to do that right now. But to show off kind of the command line sense of things, what I want to stress here is that everything that you are doing, finding a button for, is basically can be done in the command line. So don't rely heavily on the tools as much as possible. Know that you can start typing something and it should give you options, which makes things a lot easier as you're starting to learn things. So if I were trying to think about how to draw a line, I could start typing that out, and CAD gives me a lot of different commands to be able to do. So notice how I didn't even go down into the command line for that. I do not have to click and activate the command line to start typing. I can literally be wherever it is that I am in my space, and I can start typing. So if I want to type properties and click enter, enter and spacebar is your next best thing for anything that you're doing. Enter or spacebar will complete that command. So we have escape as our best friend to get out of something. You know, if you're selecting and deselecting and grabbing and moving, hit escape and it'll cancel out of that command. The enter or spacebar command will actually repeat or complete a command as we're done. So this just opened up my my properties manager here. Now, there's a few different options, and depending on your setup, you might type this command and it might look a little different or shaped a little bit different. Might be floating, it might automatically be docked. But know that as we start manipulating this stuff, these dark header bars on this dialog box, and I'll bring up my layer properties manager. So you can see if I type layer or lay or LA, it gives me my layer properties manager. So these are the two dialog boxes that I want to work with today. And you can see that they're different. They got different content in them. I can do a couple different things. I can just close it so I don't have it in the way anymore. But ideally, you're going to be able to take this guy and dock him to a portion of your window, or put him off on another screen and let him float somewhere else. I prefer mine nice and docked. So if I grab him and I start moving him over to the edge, you're going to see that he turns into this sort of silhouette, and it'll indicate where he's actually going to start going. Okay. So if I hover where it can snap, it'll basically lock it down, and it will basically be now my revised drawing space here is here and not through the back of this panel. Further, if I want him just simply out of the way until I need him, I can hover over this bar here and click this auto hide button. And that'll basically dock him even tighter to where if I hover over him, he will pop back out. I can see what I need to do and I can keep going. So I'll go ahead and just dock those guys. I can hover over the edges and resize so that it sizes to how I want it to look. And then again, I can use that auto collapse so that it's not taking up any of my space, but I can go to it if I need to and work. Last thing, and this is a personal preference, and where we're positioning these is up to you guys for sure, but personal preference, some people leave this command line floating as it is, and you can see as I type things into the command line, it's sort of giving me a list that sort of floats back through my model space. I do not like that. I like to be able to not have things fall behind any kind of dialog box or panel. So I'm going to take this guy here and I'm going to grab those little dots. And if I start hovering him over the bottom, he can lock to it, but that's not what I want. I actually want to go a little bit further, and you'll see that it goes into that silhouette. Doing that will actually dock it into the actual workspace so that my drawing space does not ever go through my command line. And I can modify him. I like to see 3 lines of what has been done, specifically so that as I'm doing certain commands, I can see what its results are here in the list. So do we have any questions up till now, Jer?
Oh, yeah, like for instance, a good question on how to set that the background color. So
Okay.
a few questions that resulted in those AutoCAD options, but I
Okay.
think you've got a good more beginner
Yep.
path going. So keep on trucking.
Cool. So I guess I should say too, if we're watching this and we're hoping to see how to customize certain things, we're definitely holding on to that for part 2, so that we can go into tweaking a lot more of those different settings and stuff like that. So this is just using the defaults as they kind of line up and try to at least get familiar with those tool sets there. So um, one other thing that I did want to mention though, before moving on too hard, is the actual ribbon itself. How to kind of navigate that thing. My approach to a lot of things is just start clicking around and get familiar with stuff. I'm a hands-on guy. So some people might see this little white box arrow guy and not know what it does and maybe accidentally click it and something happens. And maybe you get to a different view and you lose your stuff. Remember that that's there because it might just be cycling to a different view of your ribbon. And that will affect how you actually see stuff and it might freak you out. So being unfamiliar with stuff, you will not remember that's there. But if you can, this guy here is your best friend just from like a where your stuff might have gone. So all right, so now that we've kind of got ourselves familiar with our setup and a couple of the adjustments and stuff like that, I do want to point out a couple more things. The lower toolbar set here is super important. Yours might not look like this. We have a few debates on, or people have their own preference on what options they check. Just know that these tools are here, and if they are blue, that means they are active. If you don't see any tools here, it actually doesn't mean that they're possibly not used. You need to look at this little hamburger button here, the customize ribbon options here. All of these guys here, if they're checked, it does not mean they are on. It means they are visible down in this lower toolbar set. So just because I have my my snap settings on, if I unchecked it here in this guy here, where is it? Yeah, there he is. Doesn't mean he's off. It means that he's just not visible. So understand that these are here because this, more often than not, especially if you're accidentally pressing buttons and stuff like that, you're like, okay, what just happened? Why do I have all these grids? That is a potential button you accidentally clicked and it turned it on. So knowing that something might be on in the lower thing will help you kind of navigate your space even more. So now as we navigate, you'll see that I'm able to click that rolly button down, the scroll wheel down, and get my hand. Now it's obviously not, I'm not seeing anything because I haven't done anything in my model space, but I would say just as a general practice, when you open up a drawing, it's not a bad idea to double rolly click. Do a zoom extents because, oops, look at that. I actually had stuff in this model and I didn't even know it. So getting files from contractors or architects and stuff like that, there might be something out there in space somewhere that didn't know it was there and cause you bigger grief. So just utilize those those basic navigation tools to help confirm that you got stuff or don't got stuff in the drawing. So now we're here. I got this thing just as the reference again, but if you're looking at where I'm kind of pointing and navigating, I will say these files, this file specifically, will be available for people to download in the recording, so that if you wanted to play around with and practice your skills of zooming into there or moving over and zooming into there or moving over and zooming into there, you can actually start playing around with and see how it actually all works. If I want to select just those two things there, or select all things here, or hit escape, all of these tools can now start being your best friend on kind of getting familiar with doing stuff. So what does that actually mean with drafting then? Well, I know this stuff is here. It was drawn, but how do we know what size things are going to be? So setting the units is number one in opening up CAD and confirming what we're actually drafting in, right? So I've been navigating around, but I still need to know what I'm actually planning on using, especially if I start typing distances on stuff. So if we start typing, you'll see that it starts coming up in the list here. Go to units, and we can see I'm actually set to decimal feet. That's definitely a preferred draft method, but again, depending on where you're at, you might be in meters or millimeters, so some metric stuff. Know that decimal inches is not a thing. So if you're actually working with an architect file that is set to this, make sure it's architectural inches so that it actually functions properly. But those are your different ways of actually setting your units to the drawing. Okay. So with that, we've confirmed our units are set and we can now draw stuff. So depending again on what units you're in, you're going to simply activate that command. We're going to go ahead and draw a polyline. So the shortcut key for that is PL, or you can type poly and see that it comes up, or you can obviously look into the ribbon set and find your tools that you want to use. So here's why we stressed the command line and using the prompts and stuff like that. This is where most people kind of forget to look and they don't know where to go for things. The command line is there to guide you along throughout the tools that you're using. So we can see here that I typed polyline. Well, now it wants me to pick a start point. So I can go ahead and click anywhere. And you can see now that I have this rubber band line, and you can see the command line has now changed. So I can see, okay, do I want to choose an arc or a half width or a length or, whoa, all these options. Well, if I just keep drawing, it's just going to keep drawing a polyline. Those additional grayed out letters or words there are additional commands so that as I'm going, I can press the key that is highlighted. So in this case, those are blue. I can go ahead and press A and hit enter or spacebar, and it will actually turn itself into an arc. So now I can start drafting in my nice little curves. It follows those tangents. And if I need to, I can go back to a line and go. So I right-clicked for enter. You can hit enter and it'll stop the command. So that's as easy as it is. If we wanted to draw a circle, you can start typing the word and you can look at the command line. Look at that command line. Hitting spacebar or enter actually just repeats the command. So we can very, very quickly start doing stuff. We can enter in those dimensions. So we didn't do that. Let's go ahead and draw one more thing. And let's just draw a line at 10 feet. So we know our units are decimal feet. So if I type 10 and hit enter, that right there, it went to the 10-foot mark. That is a 10-foot line. If I look at my properties, I can see entity info on that object and see that it says it right there. So very, very quickly, you can start drafting things up just by simple lines and circles. Just follow the command line and you're going to be good. So we've drawn a bunch of stuff, but it all looks the same, right? So how do we actually get different looks? Well, that's where our layers come into play. So layers are only there to help organize line work that we've actually done or plan to do. Okay, so we can see all of these items, and in my quick access toolbar, I see my layers set here. I could look at my properties of what's selected and see some information if they existed on different layers, which I don't think I actually have anything on different layers. So let's try that right now. We'll go to my layer properties manager and let's just go ahead and make a new layer. So the green check means that that layer is active. So if I double click any layer that might exist, it's going to activate that layer. So now that layer is the current layer, which means anything that I draw is going to now be on that layer, not, you know, whatever other layer is there. So here's what I wanted to kind of show is if you select multiple lines or objects, it might tell you that there's a variance in the layers that are selected. So it's a pretty good indication to, if you're like selecting stuff, if you want all of this to be on the same layer, then you can change it, but know that it's picking up several different layers in there. So our layer properties manager is here. The little sun guy here is going to just create a new layer. You can name it whatever you want. So let's call it property line. We have a lot of documentation that I'm not even going to go into, from like a proper procedure on setting up layer names and stuff like that. But just know that you'll want to make sure that this is the main intent here is to be organized and standardized for what layers you're using for things. And then there's just a quick glimpse. I wanted to just basically touch on being able to create that new layer, setting the color, because the color is indeed what is going to translate over when we actually plot. And there's a great little webinar we just recently did called Plotting in Style that will go over you know, the ins and outs of why you use colors the way that you use them, because it's going to be basically translating a color into a thickness. So these are our index colors, so you can pick any given color that you want to, and that color will translate to a specific thickness when we plot. So setting that up is how, or setting those here is how you would really manage those layers. The only other one that I really want to just lightly touch on is the line types here. So you can see we have line weights; those shouldn't be touched. Whether or not it's locked, that layer is locked, and then our different line types. If you click on any one of those buttons there, it'll bring you to the respective edit change box. And you might not see anything here. So how you get those line types is you just simply load them. The ISOs are for metric. Know that you have all kinds of different predefined styles in here. And so maybe I want my property line dashed. As long as it's loaded in here, you can assign it to that specific guy here. So as I draw my polyline, you're going to see, and he's scaled here. You're going to see that it will draw in what that actual scale of the line type is, so that you can see those dashes that way. So not going too deep, just covering where you actually can find that. We'll hit those a little bit deeper, and we've got documentation on that past. So from here, we need to start looking at how we lay this stuff out and going over to our paper space. Before we do that, Jer, are there any questions?
You know, lots of good questions, you know, all around on different topics and things. One good one was just, you know, reminder of, you know, how important those units are. And in fact, how you got into it is you just simply started typing units.
Yep.
That is a very, very good command to know, because it really should be the first command you ever type when you're setting up a plan, setting up a drawing there.
Okay. Yep. Good remember. You know, before moving over to paper space, just as an additional, we'll call it a teaser deal, we're not going to go in too much, but as you're drafting things, you might get sick and tired of the repetitive creation of certain things, or you want to move things around. So, how to manipulate stuff. Again, look at some of the tools, some of the basic tools that you might have here to help with that. But remember those, I guess, you don't know the commands, but remember what it might be called. So I want to move something. Why don't you just try typing move? And you can see that is indeed a command. Or I want to copy something, right? So obviously that might be something. And there's some cool options, right? To be able to take this guy and move him over here. So it's just a click to select him, run the command, follow the command line, click him, it picks it up. I'm not holding the mouse button at all. And then I'm going to click him to place him. So it's that same thought process as we were selecting and deselecting stuff as we do different commands. And then again, as just a light broach on the subject, don't underestimate your right click. The right click is going to give you a lot of different commands depending. So go ahead and just start playing with it. We'll cover that a little bit more in part 2. But just know that there's a lot of different things here to, speed up the process of certain things. Keeping in mind, just use that escape key, use the enter key, use the spacebar as you're drafting around. I don't think I'm going to go into that too much unless we have time at the end. So we're going to go ahead and go to our layout. So we can go ahead and just select the layout. And now we're here in paper space. The paper should be defined. You should see a very defined difference between what is paper and what is not. So if it's only like this, go ahead and try to double roly click and see if it brings it back to what it is. Zoom in and out, make sure that you can pan and see this piece of paper. That's the first important part. Obviously units, we've checked those, we're good. But the next important part from a paper perspective, it's a lot of P words, is how big that paper is actually listed here. Because it just says by default, it might just say layout 1. If you're working with maybe a template and you see that it has other things, maybe they've determined that there's sizes here, for what it looks like, and maybe they're accurate. But to confirm what paper size you're actually using for that layout, you gotta know what that page setup is looking like. So we can simply right click on the layout itself. If it's active, right click on it. And you're going to have this option, Page Setup Manager. This is super, super important because not only will it just give you a snapshot right here about some basic stuff, but here's where you're actually going to be able to modify this specific layout. So this will look like the plot style or the plot manager when you go to plot a layout, but this is the internal settings of this specific layout. So we're sticking with some default stuff where we've got to assign a specific plotter, where to print it, the CTB file that will determine how it's going to print, what colors print at what thickness, and the paper size. So if we can confirm here that it says this is an 8.5 by 11, and that's what we want, then we're good. We can go ahead and choose though, maybe we want to lay this out on an 11 by 17. And so as soon as we say okay to that, you're going to see that that paper just sort of bumped up in size a little bit, okay? The page layout option is only going to be grayed out if you're not actively on this guy. So if I go and I make another layout here and I right click on him, he's going to be grayed out because I'm actually active on layout 1. So I have to be on this specific layout to right click and get to that guy here. So, so we're going to go ahead and here's our paper size. Well, I can't do anything to this paper because I don't have a window into my model space. So I need to make a viewport. The easiest way to do that is to type MV for make view. follow the command line, but you can specify the corner of the viewport. So I'm going to click once, and now I have this little window box guy, and it's going to let me pick the second point. So for this purpose, I'm going to fill the whole page just because I don't have a title block, but you would generally maybe have a title block that you're accounting for that you don't want in the way of your model space. So we'll go ahead and click there, and you can see that it will automatically zoom extents to what is in the model. So if by chance you were setting up something and you did a viewport and it ended up looking like this, and you're like, oh, there's nothing there, chances are that your model space has something clear out in the boonies that you did not realize. And that's the importance of that zoom extents, so that it doesn't lead you down a wrong path of, oh, where did my model go, type of a thing. So we'll go ahead and just keep this guy here. So now I have this double click action that I can go into. If I click inside, double click inside, or double click outside, you can see that it's activating so that I can continue to lay things out how I need to, or I can double click out so that I'm outside of manipulating that layout. So the important part to this is that even if I made this stuff fit just like this, it's not to scale. Okay, if I were to print this out and try to measure something, it would be incorrect. So we do need to translate the units that we're in to a scale that would be representative and fit properly. So I know we drew a 10-foot line here. So let's just, for giggles, activate our viewport, and let's set, I'm going to use the easiest way it is to set a scale to a viewport, and that's through our FX plot scale button. Okay, so if on any one of the tabs, if you find our scale button, if you click this guy here, it's going to say, okay, what scale do you want to use? We're going to say 1 inch equals 10 feet. That's fine. And so we'll say, okay. And if you're actively in the viewport, it'll say, do you want to set it? And we say yes. So that right there zoomed things appropriately so that if we were to print this 11 by 17 page out, and I'm going to draw a line on paper space here to compare. We'll just put them up here. So this line here is as if we were to print this paper out and measure this line. If I take my, I'm just going to grab my dimension tool so we can visibly see it here. So I have a 1 foot thing. I have a wrong inch mark there, so kind of ignore that. But if I were to dimension this guy, he's 10. So this is 1 unit, and it's equaling this 10 units. So the fact that we scaled, we double clicked in here and we scaled this from 1 inch equals 10 feet. It made it so that if I measure this, that will be 1, but it will equal what it actually is drawn in model space. So I know that's starting to get a little brain fry there, but Jared, do we have any questions?
Like I said, many questions. I'm not sure
pertaining to scale or layout or.
That was a good one, but like that dashed line there, that is reported by the plot driver as the printable area. So that little dashed outside rectangle is, so according to the plot driver, that is the extent of how far it can go to the edge of the page. So that's a good one to be aware of. You wouldn't want your title block to extend beyond that.
Or your models or your viewport of sorts, and
that's
have
right.
it be right here, because it'll cut off that little bit. See, that even was something I overlooked. So thank you for pointing that out. Yes, I muscle memory put my my viewport right inside of that, if you notice that. So um, so yeah, that's definitely there. So I do want to try this one more time, just as a another test here. So we'll go ahead and um, I'm going to double roly click in here just because I want to make sure that this is the content that I was given. Um, it's there. If I were to actually make a viewport and see those three items, you're going to see that here's a less drastic version of what I was explaining, but you can see that it found something somewhere else in the model that I wasn't aware of. So to eliminate that kind of stuff, we just want to make sure that we're zoom extending to see what in the world is in our drawing, so that we can make the right decisions about cleaning up our files to only hold the stuff that we actually need in there. So we'll go ahead and double click in there, double roly click, and I'm brought to the zoom extents of what is in here. If I printed this 11 by 17 out right now, as it's scaled, it will not be correct. So double clicking inside to activate that viewport will allow me to run that scale command. And I want to go, this plan is 1 inch equals 20 feet. Great. I'll say okay. I'll set that viewport scale. It's going to shrink things down so that as I'm looking at this, 1 inch on paper is equaling 20 feet. So this little pergola guy is a 20-foot pergola, which means that as I measure him out, he measures out 1 inch and he equals 20 feet, which means everything else is going to be respective to that. So what happens now if I go in here and I'm moving things around and I accidentally tweak something, right? It's now out of scale. So we want to be able to, take that assurity of things are to scale, and we want to be able to lock that viewport so that we're not messing with that. So there's a couple different ways to do that, but if I'm active in my actual viewport, down in that lower section, you can see there's a little lock, and it'll be near a scale indicator here. But if that lock is blue, just like everything else, blue means on. If that's on, if I'm in my viewport model space area, active viewport, I can scroll in and out, I can try to pan, and it's not going to move things. So it's a way to basically get things set the way you want them and then not accidentally go in there and create havoc. So I can obviously activate it and unlock it if I need to take him carefully and move him over to the side. Oh, but look at, I just changed the scale because I wasn't careful. So, it's one of those things that you gotta be careful about as you use those commands, and then lock it back up and you're good. Double click outside to deactivate. I can even change the scale of that viewport so that I can fit more things on my page if I need to, maybe some notes, a schedule, my title block. So that's how you can start manipulating that. If I select the viewport, again, I still have those same options. I could unlock that viewport just by selecting it, or if I right click, I do have some additional options here for how you do that. So you might be used to using CAD and just using the right click menu for that, but just know it's here as well. The last thing, and this is more of a what happened because I didn't realize where I was kind of a situation. You might not be in paper space, and you might just sort of zoom in, just unknowingly working on stuff, and you double clicked inside of the model space or into that viewport, and now I'm stuck. It looks like I'm in model space, but you can tell that I'm actually in paper space. So how in the world do I get out of that? Well, there's a couple keyboard commands, but just the very simple, look down in this command line or in the toolbar set here, below the command line and click the word model, and it will pop you back to paper so that you can do stuff. So know that if you're going to be working in paper space here, don't go past your viewport before activating it, or you're going to jump into that and not be able to double click outside of that range easily. You might accidentally click on the viewport itself, which is going to put you in max viewport mode or viewport max mode. So how do you get out of that? Same thing. You can click this guy here and get back out of viewport. But another one is just saying VP min. That's going to minimize your viewport. Or if you type VP max, it'll activate that. So again, there's always something at the command line that can work, but just know that that's there as you're starting to play around. I know I fell victim to this several times, and sometimes I couldn't get out, so I did the worst thing and I just deleted my layout and recreated it. But you don't need to. You're just stuck. There's a little switcheroo there. All right, so we got like 4 minutes to answer any more questions. Anything else we want to show? Anything I missed, Jer?
Oh gosh, just definitely some really good input on, kind of where we want to go, as you can imagine, because people want to get into XREFs and,
Yep.
the ins and outs of XREFs, of course, which is, that's for the next session.
XREFs is technically third, I think.
Oh, third, exactly. Yeah. Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there.
We have resources available that cover that stuff if you're really chomping at the bit, for sure. But yeah, so.
Exactly. Yeah. I think, as Jake and I were talking, earlier, that intro to AutoCAD courses are typically, like at a community college would be a 9-week class. And so, we're trying to compress that down into a few 1-hour sessions. So obviously we're going to be just little baby steps, and we'll be getting into things, but we're going to be referencing a lot of other resources and webinars. As for this webinar, this is recorded, as we mentioned, and it'll be up on the website later today. So get ready for that. And some fantastic feedback on this one. Please keep these the feedback coming on what you want to see in the rest of the session. So we want to make sure it's as applicable as possible to you and your pace of learning and what you need to learn and all of that. So anyway, other than that, hey, have a great and safe weekend, and we will see you at the next session.
Thanks, guys.